Hey everybody, XEI here. Welcome back to a blind, not really let's play, a BioShock Remastered. I'm going to spend this episode going through the director's commentary just to see if there's anything interesting that can be revealed and talked about. I think based on the comments there might be a slight spoiler for BioShock 2, I think. I don't remember if it was 2 or Infinite that there might be a spoiler for, but hopefully without context it won't matter to me. I'm going to just hit play. I'm going to see how this feels, and if it works out, then I guess you'll be watching the product of that. If it doesn't, then it's going to be lost to the archives. Here we go. Making Rapture real.
Hey, I'm Jeff Keighley here in Boston to go behind the scenes to hear
Ooh, that
some
creepy little
untold
sister behind the
stories
scenes
about
there.
the making of BioShock with
With the
Ken
shadow
Levine
too.
and Sean
Well done.
Robertson.
That name also sounds familiar to me. Kev Levine or Kevin Levine. That seems like, it sounds like a very familiar name to me. Imagining BioShock, making Rapture real.
Let's talk a bit about the theme.
Oh my god,
and
that
setting of
sister's so
BioShock
creepy. I would
Rapture.
totally have one in my house.
I think a lot of people, when
I
they played
would.
the game for the first time, Ken, they wondered, how did you even dream up this place?
I'm curious to see how
And I know
much
you
of
said
the
publicly before that part of
art
the reason
information,
sort of
color,
what led you to
sound
Rapture was this idea of
gets
fully
talked about.
simulating a place. Tell us about that sort of idea and the frustrations you had with other games where you sort of hit a bound.
I think our philosophy was always to do what we were doing 100% rather than try to do something bigger and do it 50% or 40%. So one of the ideas of, and this sort of came from System Shock 2 as well, where you focus on an area that you can really
Never seen the game.
bring to life and
Never really heard of it.
kind of eliminate the questions of, well, why can't I go over the bridge?
But it
to
sounds
New Jersey?
spiritual
So we were
successory.
able to really make a place, I think, that
Shock
felt
isn't the word.
believable and real, even though in actuality it was really quite limited. But we just sort of dressed it with all these buildings.
Just look at those
outside
colors and
that were all
like the direction. See the visual direction there with that sign pointing down to here, and then the colors drive your eye.
rather than some kind of like predetermined map which we set down, which is a little different than like System Shock 2, where we actually
There was
mapped
a
the
2
spaceship out
of it.
deck by deck.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the philosophy felt a little different there, because you want to feel like a real spaceship that was sort of stacked on top of each other. Rapture was free to sprawl.
Remember how I
across
made
the
that
ocean.
comment of I wonder if the
Although you
map
guys
was
originally,
designed in a
Sean,
way
were
that actually
talking
made
about doing
sense,
this game on a sort of
like
spaceship
relevant to
camp.
everything you looked
when
out
we
to
first started talking
through the
about
windows.
what the spiritual successor to System
It was a
Shock
spiritual
2 was gonna
successor.
be,
I don't know what that
Spaceship
game is.
came up, but again, we wanted a limited environment, and we didn't necessarily want to do Spaceship again. And our first actual exploration of this space was underwater, but ultimately ended up looking like a spaceship. It just happened to have a couple of
Windows.
seaweed fronds outside.
Interesting.
And that started to push us towards what artistic statement that we wanted to make this look different, and what rules we were going to set for the world. How at every turn we were going to try to remind the player that they were in fact underwater. And
See
that
how
this
that
wasn't a
angle of that
spaceship.
sign
How,
points
like,
to that shadow?
underwater, we obviously
Another
went
one of the
underwater
like,
than sort
the
of
idea of those
sky. Like,
angles
what-
directing your eye
Where did you
and
come
color.
with the idea of like doing this underwater?
I think there was probably a conversation. It's like, well, what kind of places could be cut off from
Yeah.
other places?
Yeah.
Like, well, spaceship, summer camp, like
Yeah.
any island notion, right? Something that's cut off from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So you never felt like you should be able to go over that bridge to New Jersey.
I don't want to apply some deep and meaningful conversation. I think it was one of those ideas that you just kind of say, and then everybody's, that sounds cool. Let's try
we
that.
could do
Let's go for it.
Don't think it's
And
really
I
ever
think
been
it lended
done, right?
itself to
A
having
game taking
very
place
nice views out the window
under the
without
water?
having to build an insane amount of unique
Like
assets.
this, like
By today's
settlement
standards, we
under the
still were a
water?
small team back then, and there's an expectation that because you're underwater, the view distances are going to be short, so you can really kind of fade out into the fog at a short distance and not have the expectation that why can't I see forever. So there's a lot of limitations in a good way. That we
There's a
set on
mechanical
ourselves,
little
but
loophole
being
there too,
underwater,
because
as
of
opposed to,
atmospheric
like, if you were
perspective
on a
and
cruise
stuff.
ship, then you'd expect to see
Or load,
across the water, and we'd
like
have to deal with
system
that.
load.
Same thing with an island,
Or
and
in
you
a
have
city in
outdoor.
the sky. Where
Yeah, exactly.
Which was a lot more complicated, yeah.
So you came up with the idea of let's do this underwater, let's do this sort of isolated place.
And then
you
you
had
get the
answered the
sky,
question,
so then you just
why
got
would
clouds and
someone
sky
build
probably.
it?
So
that's sort of how it works.
same
the order
sort of
operations.
mechanical
You then had to
benefit.
come up with a story to explain.
Yeah, I think we wanted a very believable reason why they'd be there, and sort of the necessary isolation of the place sort of led to, well, what kind of person would want to do this? And I wasn't even particularly aware of the sort of political implications of what I was reading, but I've been reading, I had read The Fountainhead.
Right.
By Ayn Rand.
You guys talked about this in the comment, Ayn Rand.
Story. Like I didn't realize that people were sort of basing their sort of
That's
political
why everyone
lives around it.
brings that up.
I wasn't that tuned in to that stuff at that point, and so. But I love the dialogue and the kind of speechifying in it because you can.
I've read a lot of philosophy too. I took philosophy. I was gonna do a major in philosophy.
Certainty and that kind of confident. Philosophy,
but I never heard
it just seemed like a natural kind of thing to apply to this place, and so it just sort of all came together as a sort of who is the guy who would do this? Well, you know, that character. It was sort of this amalgamation of characters from Ayn Rand's books and Ayn Rand herself. This sort of idealistic person who says, well, the only way to do this is to separate from the rest of the world, and that led to Andrew Ryan.
I am Andrew Ryan. And I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone.
We knew from a technical standpoint that we wanted isolation. We also knew to sell it, we needed a compelling storyline, a backstory that why would this place exist? Otherwise, how are we going to make
and very interesting approach
if we don't
on how to tell that story through the audio logs.
So once we decided on the underwater location and then the closed off spaces, that objectivist story kind of came in and made the art stronger and made the level design stronger because we could feed back.
Oh, I hope they talk about level design.
I think
it's so good.
Have sort of Andrew Ryan's pitch right at the beginning of the game. We wanted people to understand why somebody would go there, and so he makes this very personal one-to-one pitch to the gamer, but also that was the pitch you make to people, which was, you know, there's a place that you can be free of all these things, where you could not be sort of put upon by the government and not be afraid of nuclear war and not be afraid of all these other things
that
will plague you on the surface. We wanted that pitch to
you almost got worse,
resonate and make sense, because
not almost, you did.
Otherwise, by the time you got there,
society
like,
broke down
this place is just
on a personal level.
Nobody would ever come
that
here.
spread like a virus.
The place was also tied into that. It had to be a very attractive proposition.
Those freaking creepy shadows, man.
Who would believe that people would go leave their lives and go to the bottom of the ocean?
I'm sure in some ways you had to convince the team and enroll them in your sort of vision of, you know, who this character was going to be and what the setting was going to be.
I wish this showed you how long the video was while I was playing, but I can't tell anything. I'm like, I moved my mouse around this thing
on a horse and said, Ayn Rand, everybody read The Fountainhead.
Exactly.
Oh.
I bought 30 copies of
Yeah, I think, you know,
Here's a 2,000-page book or something.
Yeah.
Go read it.
I mean, really, it was more organic. You know, like I said, we knew that we had this location, and you struggle to fill it with stories, and you struggle to find meaning of why does this place exist? You know, what's my motivation?
Yeah.
And as Ken started to explore Ayn Rand a little more and started talking to us about it, and we were having that conversation, and it's like, oh, this could totally work. Like, this is exciting. Like, this is something that really hasn't been done in a video game before. And if we had flipped it and come up with the idea first before the location, I don't think we would have really been that excited about it. But we had a location, and now we're trying to fill it with that story. And because of the order of operation there, I start to get excited. Like, oh, I could totally make this work. This is going to really make it feel like a lived-in space.
You know, as you think of sort of the, you know, the setting, and you think of maybe a character or something, was there a moment that you think back, it's like, oh, like right then and there, like I got excited when you attached the Ayn Rand
For me,
stuff
it was
to
going to Rockefeller Center. And seeing the visual.
It's almost like a staple architectural piece from that era of art.
If you go to Rockefeller Center, it basically looks exactly like Rapture. It's because every
and
building,
culture,
you're sort of encircled. It's this block in
thinking,
New York, or a couple of blocks in New York, where Radio City Music Hall is.
Been all these places on an art trip.
Rockefeller Plazas, where you see that show 30 Rock, and the ice skating rink, and where they put the Christmas tree, and it's this very iconic location. But what's cool about it, it's all one. Unlike the rest of the city, everywhere you look, it's one architectural style. It's Art Deco, and it's very iconic Art Deco. And my wife and I were there, and we were sort of working on the game. We didn't have a visual style, and all of a sudden I started looking around, and I said, "Oh, this could."
So
be
the style came after
visual
the
for
idea
the
of
game."
Ayn Rand's
Also, the geometry of it was actually quite
philosophical
conducive to making
ideas.
a video game because it wasn't overly complicated geometry. Art Deco is quite
Old and simple.
bold and geometric, yeah, and simple. And so my wife and I bought a couple of Taurus cameras before. This was before iPhone cameras,
exactly.
you know.
Throwaway cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah, throwaway cameras, those little Kodak things, and
Wow.
we just started photographing
Those days.
doorknobs and light fixtures, and just sort of developed the photos.
That's
Remember that?
crazy.
Brought them in and said,
Come to the office. Here's a stack of
here's
stuff.
a
Sean,
stack of
take a
photos.
look.
I'll see you guys in a couple of years. Go make this.
City where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow,
So good.
Rapture can become your city as well.
Man, oh
So you
man.
had kind of a theme. You came up with an art style, some of the iconic characters, and then you really had to build the narrative around it. And you've talked about a lot of the themes in the game, and greed, jealousy, sex, violence, all the things that sort of drive us or what destroy us. And that was something I think that as you thought about the story of the game, you wanted to, I'm sure, reflect some of those, right? Because I think people love the characters. It's sort of flawed in a way, and this is a
Really
world
flawed.
which is its own little
What time
microcosm,
is it?
but had a lot of tension inside of it.
Yeah, I mean, the character of Ryan was sort of, he's basically invisible through most of the game, right? Except for a very small portion. But he's very present because he exists, the city is him, right? It's such a representation of him. We never
Didn't I
wanted
make a
to
comment
cut
like
away
that?
a cutscene where you saw Andrew Ryan,
Oh, I think I
Ryan
cut around it
and
like an
Steve,
idiot.
We wanted him to be very present.
I think I
without
did.
actually being present. But once you had Ryan,
So I thought I was
you had
overstepping
this
my concept.
desire to protect
My
this
idea.
vision of his.
It's literally the line I
You had
used.
you just had to then come up with the characters who'd be arrayed in opposition to him. So we had this character, the Big Daddy, and then eventually
That
the
he
character,
becomes
the
this like
sister,
force of nature
and so
where
the characters
he
like
is the
Tenenbaum,
city is him.
Here's a person who's
And
in
so you
opposition
never
to
really have
this
to meet
region,
Ryan
so
because you're
for more noble reasons. And then you have
the
this
city
character
is
like
Ryan.
Alice, who's much more a cynical opposition. Once we had all those characters already, we're like, well, who are you? And you ended up being a sort of a pawn in the middle of all this opposition to Ryan. We just kept sort of homing in on that theme and making sure that you weren't, eventually figuring out that you couldn't just be here by an accident, that you're an integral part of what this story, even though you don't know you're an integral part of this story. You think you're just there by happenstance.
Look, Mr. Bubbles, it's an angel. I can see light coming
an
from
angel
the sky.
fallen from heaven from the
Isn't it?
surface world
It's so
into
pretty.
Rapture
It's
as a
like
chosen one, the biblical
I know
Rapture
that
thing.
angels sing.
So many layers. So many layers. Well done. Well done. And with that, I'm going to wrap this one up just to see how this one works on YouTube in particular. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a massive concern about these things ending up on YouTube. I haven't done any research ahead of time, so we'll see how that one goes. I will be going through all of these myself, but I'm going to see how just YouTube treats this first one before moving on and before watching all the other ones, and I will react to it live in the next episode. And so I will see you there if I come back. Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire, buddy. Peace.